Hello, Mark Anderson here, Home Loan Officer at Carrollton Bank in St. Louis, Missouri, presenting episode 3 of my series, The 5-Minute Mortgage Class, where I'm teaching people how to save money on their mortgage and about all the various mortgage options that are out there today. Today's episode is a popular topic, how to crunch numbers for renting versus buying. Well, I'll be honest, if you were expecting some graphs, charts, calculation methods, equations, etc., I have to admit at this point the title of this video is a little bit of a trick. I personally don't believe that there is a single rule of thumb, a single calculation, data that any one person can look at to tell them whether or not it makes sense to buy a home. I'm not really a big believer in math driving the decision about whether to rent or to buy. Now, math is important in the process, and it's important to understand the numbers that are involved in it. But in terms of comparing what's better, I think at the end of the day, it's much more important to make some considerations about what renting means versus what buying means. The other thing that I want to point out is that if you listen to industry professionals, their opinions on buying versus renting, candidly, if you're talking to a realtor or a lender, it is no surprise that most of the time we are going to be highlighting to you all of the reasons that you should go buy a home. Not only should you buy a home, you should buy a home right now. One of the things that bothers me about this general line of advice, the obvious conflict of interest, but then also it's just not a very nuanced picture of what it really means to buy a home or to rent. One of the things that kind of drives me a little bonkers is this idea that you've got home ownership on one hand, and then you've got throwing away your money, burning your money on rent on the other. I don't think that that's a fair comparison. I think that certainly there are some pros and cons to buying a home versus renting. I certainly understand the sentiment that renting I guess in theory, not making the best use of your money. But when you go down to the individual level, you're the one in the driver's seat for this decision. And I think that industry professional opinion is great if you need advice on what it means to buy a home or what it means to get a mortgage for a home. But in terms of the basic decision making as far as whether or not you should buy, I think that you should be wary of relying on industry professionals to tell you that homeownership is automatically the right thing for all people, because I don't think that it is. Now, the considerations that you should be making up front, there is a monthly payment consideration. So if you are paying an amount in rent right now, that if you converted it into a mortgage payment, if that could get you a sales price for a home that would work well for you, that's in your budget, that's great. If you have the down payment that you need to buy a home, which in many cases you can qualify for first-time homebuyer down payment assistance. You can get away with really as little as 3% down. All or some of that can come from down payment assistance that's out there. If you can find something that fits in your monthly payment range, you've got a down payment option. It certainly makes sense to look at your options when it comes to buy a home. Ultimately, like I said, there's not an equation that I'm really going to tell you is going to drive the decision about whether or not it makes sense to buy or to rent. But I think that we should go through just objectively the pros and cons to what it means to buy a home. Now, the pros, we'll start there. Equity. This is a big one. Over time, as you pay down the balance in your mortgage, you are going to have equity in that home. And when you go to sell that, you could have a sizable down payment on the next property. You've also got, hand in hand with that, appreciation. Over time, it is likely that your home will appreciate in value. Now, over what time horizon you're going to realize that appreciation, it depends a lot on the property you buy, a lot on the market. It is definitely worth mentioning that over time, over a longer period of time, you stand a greater chance of gaining that appreciation. You also have stability when you own a home. When you rent, there's always the possibility that the landlord can pull the plug. They may decide to sell the property. You had a great landlord, now you have a not so great landlord. You have some stability certainly when you own your own home. And along with that stability, you've got independence. I think that there is a reason that owning a home is part of the traditional American dream. You have your own home, and that is a value in itself that a calculator really can't solve for. It is worth it to be aware of the cons. There are unexpected costs. I've owned a few homes myself over the years, and I can tell you that sometimes around the bend, There's a $5,000 repair that needs to be done. Now, there are some things that you can do to mitigate these costs. In addition to home insurance, you can have a home warranty plan that may cover appliances and systems like your heating and air conditioning. But it's worth noting that there are going to be unexpected costs as you own a home. There's also improvements that you're going to want / possibly need to make to the property over time. Now, one thing that's true about these improvements from a mathematical standpoint is putting in a new kitchen is unlikely to get you a dollar for dollar appreciation on the property. Now, there are exceptions to this. If you get in at an exceptionally low price point, you make major renovations to a property. Those are the cases, the property flippers and things like that. Their improvements really do earn them a profit. But for the average homeowner, it's worth it to be aware of the possibility that your improvements may not get you a dollar for dollar increase in your sales price when the time comes. So you've got stability on one hand over here with owning, but what do you have also as a con? You've got a lack of flexibility. Let's say your job moves. Let's say you are all of a sudden required to move across the country. Well, now you've got to sell, and that can be tough. Selling a home is sometimes not simple, and it's sometimes certainly not easy. There's also the shorter your time horizon for ownership, there's a risk of depreciation. It is certainly possible that you will not win the appreciation game, that you will not buy a home that appreciates in the time frame that you own it. If you have any questions about renting versus buying with your individual circumstances, I'm happy to crunch some numbers that are going to be helpful for you on an individual basis. You can call or text me at this number. Thank you very much for watching.